Hello and welcome to another episode of the What Goes On podcast. This week, we are delighted to have Mr. Chris Walla with us, who I guess most people would be most familiar with you as songwriter, producer in Death Cab, but also you've done recording and production for lots of other bands. You've also had solo projects. Field Manual, was there another one after Field Manual?
Yeah, there was the thing called Tape Loops a few years ago.
That's right, and I never got my hands on that, so yeah. I'm writing that down. Tape Loops. Cool. Okay, well, thank you and welcome.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a while, hasn't it, since we saw each other? How many years ago was that?
I think
you came over to London
4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, it's been a little bit. Yeah.
And what are you up to in Norway?
Well, since I left the band, my wife and I have been back and forth across the Atlantic a few times. We moved to Norway in 2015, and we lived in the Arctic up in Tromsø for a couple of years.
Wow.
And that was wonderful, but we also we're starting to feel like, do we live in the Arctic like forever? Is that what we do now? and so we decided we would try something else, and we moved to Montreal because she's a linguist, and the bilingual factor there was really interesting for what she's doing. And she speaks French, and I had a bunch of friends there from, years back. We Death Cab toured with Stars a couple of times, and Stars are based there. And we knew those guys, and it just felt like it was a really good, it would be a really good move. And it turns out that it wasn't.
No.
Montreal is a great city, and we did not enjoy or understand it. And so in the winters there were weirdly so much more brutal than they were up in the Arctic.
Oh, wow.
Really?
So colder. Horrible. Yeah, just like really hard. So we were there for a couple of years, and we put down roots, and then we pulled them back up and came back to Norway. So we've been here for about a year and a half. And we are, she's working on a PhD, and I am, kind of doing what I've been doing, which is like playing on things and writing with people and mixing records. And I have not done a lot of like Zoom songwriting or Zoom production as yet, but seems like that's in the cards.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. And so is most of it remote then, in terms of mixing and playing on people's records? Will they send you files and you'll do some playing and send it back and see whether they like it? Or how does that work?
That's pretty much it. Yeah. It's, I'll get stuff from people and just sort of, scratch my head and throw some stuff at it and send it back. And I think that I think it's like half really fun that way. And then half really frustrating. Like there's definitely, in every creative project, there's a moment or two where you sort of feel like, actually the thing that I'm trying to articulate, it'll be faster and easier for me if I have some time to myself. If I just have like 3 hours to kind of like figure out what this is and sort through it. And then conversely, there's always a time where it's like, oh my God, this would just be so much easier if we could be in the same room together. And so it's, I miss being in the room with people, and I miss the energy of real-time, real-world collaboration. But then also I am in a building right now that's the building is an old asylum turned school turned artist collective. And I'm in here with a bunch of kind of a bunch of crazy experimental wingnuts, and it's it's actually pretty fun in here. So we're, I've only been in here for a few months. So I'm still like kind of meeting people and figuring it all out, but yeah, it's good.
So are you there as staff of the school, or are you just renting a space there?
I'm just renting a space here. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big, it's Norwegian. It's a subsidized art collective. So,
okay.
So it's, it's a building that the municipality doesn't have a ton of use for anymore, but there's always, rather than tear those buildings down, there's always somebody who can, do something with them. So they try and sort of farm that stuff out. So
that's really good.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah.
All right.
Could do some more of that over here.
Yeah. Everywhere.
What we could do with is just like cut a huge chunk off of Norway and transport it over to the UK and give us a bit more land, and then we'd have some more room for buildings like that. It would be, I think just real estate is what we're struggling with over here. Certainly in the towns, it's just ridiculous. Right. The cost to be in a town in the UK, certainly south, is just bonkers.
Yeah. All right.
But whatever. That's where we are. So
before we get on to the house prices and stuff.
No, let's move away from that.
So when did music become a thing for you? When did that sort of spark appear and stuff?
Yeah, I would say that probably, all of my earliest memories of and reactions to music were when I was like 4 and 5 and 6, and they sort of all had to do with recordings. Like my parents weren't particularly musical. Like my mom can sing and she's got a decent voice, but it's just not her, it's not, she doesn't wake up in the morning and sing. Yeah. Yeah. And my dad has an accordion, and that's the most that I'll say about his musical. And so but they, it's like they had records, and I loved records. And one of my earliest musical memories is we had 2 copies of Sgt. Pepper in the house, and my mom's was the stereo copy and my dad's was the mono copy. And I loved that record, and I figured out that they were different. At some point I figured out they were different in the headphones depending on which one I grabbed. And I learned really early that there's extra 4 bars between Good Morning and the reprise and the mono version. And I learned pretty early that if you play with the balance control on Mom's version, it's just all that sort of thing. It's like, that's kind of how I got into it. And that always really, really interested me. And my way into the music was like by disassembling cassette decks and turntables, much to my parents' dismay.
Look
what I did. Did you know that if you do this with the stuff like that? And then, eventually I wanted to play music, and I ended up with a violin, and I broke that pretty quickly.
What kind of age would that have been?
That would have been like 9, I think, 9 or 10. Yeah. And then Mom and Dad bought a piano and decided the piano lessons were the thing, which I was really on board for. But then my piano teacher was she was a really overworked, underslept grad student. And she was, she would either put in earplugs and like grade theory papers during our lessons, or she would fall asleep. I didn't like have a lot of faith in instruction, and I just sort of always really enjoyed the kind of one-to-one of the kind of DIY, like, what does this do? Oh, that's what this does. And it's sort of how I ended up learning most of what I know how to do. Yeah.
So how did you progress through any grades with When when you were first talking about her, I thought you said overworked and underslapped.
Sounds like she could do with one.
Yeah, wake up.
Yeah. Could have been.
Sorry, back to the thread. Did you progress through any grades with her, or did it become fairly apparent fairly quickly that just wasn't going to be a route that was viable?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was actually with her for almost 3 years, I think.
Okay.
Like a really long time. And I was aware that my parents were paying for the lessons, and I was aware that there was value for that and in that, and I respected that, and I felt like I should do it. And I didn't have any real I didn't have anything to compare those lessons to.
Mm.
And also like I had a really hard time like wrapping my head around reading music, like putting those dots on the page to whatever's happening here in whatever way. That was always just really challenging for me. And mostly I just wanted to be able to play the second side of Abbey Road for myself. But she was, my teacher was a real like classical purist. That was her, she was studying classical composition, and she just didn't have any frame of reference for piano as a pop or folk instrument. And so we couldn't have been less compatible, but I didn't really know that at the time. All I knew was that it's like, God, I'm like in the 5th grade or something, and I'm still in John Thompson's book 2. And like, I'm supposed to be like practicing songs. There's like 3 notes on the staff, and the title's about elves. And what am I, this is dumb. Like, why am I doing this? So I wouldn't say that we progressed much, but I was really with her for a long time. And she eventually fired me. She just told my parents, like, I can't do this anymore.
Wow. A student being fired by a teacher.
Yeah. And so it was like, I mean, the thing I learned from that was like, oh, I'm the problem. Right. It's like, so it was, now being an adult who is like sort of, it's like one of the things we do as adults is just like sort through all the garbage that was the garbage of our earlier lives. That's that's kind of a pretty foundational experience for me. So, yeah.
And did you find a way fairly quickly, just intuit a way fairly quickly thereafter to kind of either paint over that or kind of put a sticky plaster over that experience and move forward in music? How did you kind of overcome that? Because there must have been some kind of anxiety / guilt / whatever other negative emotions attached to that experience. So how did you move forward from that?
Oh, Steve, it's still there. I didn't. I just
that makes me so sad.
Yeah. But it's, I would say that I am overcoming it. It's just but like actually like identifying it and being able to like figure out what it was and talk about it. There's sort of like a lot of it's like it's just, I don't know, it's you're doing something like the act of making music is inherently it's inherently vulnerable. And the stuff that we love the most is the stuff that is both the most vulnerable. I mean, at least for me, it tends to be the stuff that's both the most vulnerable and the most adept. There's something about being like right at the edge of your, like what you're capable of doing that's so powerful. And when that can be done with a real sort of like an open heart and a real sense of, I don't know, like bravery and selflessness, like that's so, there's just like, that just comes through the speakers, or it just, you can't put it away. But figuring out how to find that really, there's just such a well of like self-determination that you need to be able to have access to and tap into to to be able to make that happen. So I don't know. I mean, it comes and goes in different, at different points. And like, it's, you know, I find that collaborating with people is a real catch-22 because there's so much fuel and so much creativity that you get from somebody when you're in a good relationship. But you know, somewhere back here is this like inherent knowledge that somebody could just reach in and like swipe all that away.
Yeah.
They chose to. And that's you know, it really is a piece of baggage. It's something you have to kind of carry around and keep conscious of and like kind of try and work through.
And I mean, jumping forward a little bit, I remember the first time that I heard transatlanticism and just being completely floored by it. And that the opening chords and, you know, the whole band in together, like band of brothers channeling this emotion, whatever it was kind of irrelevant what the lyric was, because it was just like this, we're doing this and we're saying this. And it was such a perfect moment for the beginning of a record. And it makes me very sad that you still, in spite of having created that, there's this ogre still over your shoulder thinking it's on a, you know, this is on not the knife edge that we were talking about before, but this is on a knife edge. And at any point, or it's hanging by threads, and at any point someone could come in and it may just be gone. And it's, I think, when you consume music without creating it, you don't have a sense of the fragility of the creative process.
Yeah.
Which is, and so that, I suppose that's a little bit of why we're doing this podcast. You know, it's not that specifically, but just what goes on behind the thing that you see, the end product.
Yeah.
And the fact that there are human beings with vulnerabilities behind that stuff that you see at the front of the stage or you hear on the MP3 or the CD or the vinyl, whatever it is. And just the fact that they're human beings. They're not automatons or gods. They're just human beings who, at this point in time, like you were saying, the chemistry is just right with the people who they've done it with, or they're in the right headspace. They've had the right lead up into this moment where they can crystallize exactly what they're feeling and record that. And it's, you know, everything has to align in order for that to happen. And I just feel like on transatlanticism, it just everyone was obviously right there. So yeah,
that's really sweet to hear, Steve. Thanks. And it's and that record is really special that way. Like that is the couple of years before we started work on that record were a little tricky. You know, it's like we'd been together for 5 or 6 years, depending on how you count. And it was our 4th record. And that's like about the time that everybody's motivations for doing it in any band, in any like team collaborative endeavor, like everybody's motivations all sort of start to change. Like it gets serious. It ceases to be the thing that is the vacation from your, you know, your shitty day job or your, you know, your schoolwork or whatever it is. And it starts to, it just takes on a different place in everybody's brains and lives. And particularly as, you know, like we were all in our mid-20s and like some of our relationships are starting to get more serious. And yeah, and the couple of years leading up to that were just, it didn't always feel like, it was really starting to fray a little bit. And a couple of the tours before, you know, toward the end of the photo album cycle and before Jason joined the band were pretty rough. And I would say that the primary thing that happened during the making of Transatlanticism was that Jason joined the band, and his energy, he had a he had a gravity about him and a clarity about him and sort of a good humor about him as well, that was really, really centering and really calming. And it sort of made a lot of the, it helped a lot of the kind of stuff that we were starting to really like snipe at one another about. It all kind of fell by the wayside for that record. And it really did feel to me like it was like a gang, you know. It was like, it really was like a truly like stable four-legged stool or table again. And the push and pull on that record was really it was really healthy, and it was really productive in hindsight. It was and we, you know, everybody, each of the four of us, like, have always talked about like how that was a really special record and really fun. And I, you know, the way that we've each described it is like slightly different, but the center of it, like the gist of it, is like kind of the same, I think, for everybody. Yeah.
I definitely think that, well, from my perspective, listening to We Have the Facts and then listening to Transatlanticism, it seems like I'm struggling for a metaphor, but as you say, it feels like everything just kind of slotted into place as soon as Jason came.
Yeah,
it was that okay, that's Death Cab. Suddenly, that's a thing, and everything's working, and it's all working in harmony. Whereas there might have been pulling backwards and forwards before that point. It was just like he was the missing piece that suddenly, okay, the machine works now.
Yeah, emotionally, interpersonally, musically, like, I think that's really true. Yeah, he's such a special guy. He's so cool.
I haven't had much of a chance to kind of get to know him, but I saw him. He was playing with Tegan and Sarah, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
When they were supporting the Killers, and I was over there seeing Ronnie, and I said, I know that guy, and we had a little chat and spoke about you.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like exactly what you say, there's a gravity and a peace and a calmness about him, which I guess in the tumult of Death Cab as it was before he arrived, that must have been a real balm to the situation.
Yeah, he's just I miss him. He's a really gentle guy. He's great. Yeah, we should give him a shout.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
It's easy
to... Go on.
I was just going to say, it's really easy to kind of lose touch with people. I mean, I've been in a few bands like that, you know, both through my life, and I think I only regularly speak to a couple of members from there. And when I say regularly, I mean like twice a year. Mind you, I have to admit, I am an antisocial so.
Me too. Join the club.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because distance isn't really a thing. It's kind of emotional distance. And the longer you go between being in contact, it's, like the transatlanticism thing. If you could travel by folding a map, if you could travel by folding an emotional map, and that's what you do when you meet up. You do travel by folding the map, and then suddenly you're together again, and the connection's remade, and it's like, and you're both like, well, why don't we do this more often? And you vow to, oh well, we'll meet up again, or we'll have a FaceTime again in like a couple of weeks' time. Yeah, great, we'll do that. And then 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 decades go by before you hook up again. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just introverts. Perhaps that's what it is. I'm certainly an introvert.
Yeah. Well, I mean, me too. And I think that a lot of the magic of that band, I think, is sort of the intersection of the impulse toward the self and introversion and introspection and the desire to like connect and reach out in a really sort of big way with a big gesture. And it's a yeah, I don't know, it's a tough thing to kind of it's a tough thing to manage and to like sort of just continue to make space for, like, day after day and year after year. And I just, you know, I just got to a point where I kind of couldn't anymore. I really just needed to walk away from it. So, yeah.
We hold that thought. Because we've jumped a massive gap between the terrible piano non-teacher and you leaving Death Cab. There's a chasm that we've jumped. But so what happened then after you continued your musical journey, clearly, because here we are, you're in Norway making music and you have all of these albums and production and recording credits and things on your Wikipedia, and no doubt lots more that aren't on Wikipedia. How did you move forward from that piano lesson, Farrago?
I think that machines had a lot to do with it. I think that like continuing to circle back to like, I don't know that I've ever been particularly technical, but I find something really creative about technical things. And I find something really, really fun about like pushing the limits of a you know, a machine or a circuit or whatever it is. I just think that's like really fun. And I react to sounds, like first and foremost. I just love the like there's such a you know, a few years ago when the idea of AMSR sort of like made it to the public consciousness, more or less by way of Billie Eilish, I just got so excited. Like, oh my God, I know what that is. It's like just the idea of somebody like smacking their lips into a binaural microphone just for the sound of it, just for like good, like discernibly good reason. And then putting on a pair of headphones and pushing play on that recording you just made and going, oh, that's so cool. Like it's this really like kind of dumb, like it hits something that's like really, really visceral. And I'm just, I got so excited about that. Like for so many years, it sort of felt like, God, nobody cares about how anything sounds. And then all of a sudden there's this whole like kind of subgenre, this whole like movement of people who are just obsessed with like a particular kind of sonic detail. And that's the stuff that still like kind of gets me up in the morning. I mean, like, yeah, it's songs and it's like emotional connections that you make through songwriting and music and whatever, but like, it's really about sounds. So the way forward from the piano teacher was, you know, in the years that followed, it was like, it was getting the 4-track, and it was, you know, it was a 4-track and a 57 and a guitar and a rat pedal, and just, you know, just discovering all the kinds of glory that different kinds of transducers and machines and, you know, picks and just whatever it is, anything physical, I was just really, really into. Yeah.
That's very cool. And this may be complete nonsense because it was on Wikipedia, but apparently you started like an open mic thing at school. Is that right?
Yeah, totally right.
And how did that come about? And how did that affect your kind of performance / continuing in music?
Well, I was Yeah, I was really pretty, I was pretty bored through a lot of high school. But I had some, as I say that, I had I had a pretty great high school education, I think. The school district that I was in was, pretty well off. And we didn't have to worry about a lot of the things that a lot of other kids had to worry about. And I had some really just super supportive teachers, really interesting, pretty non-linear, maybe non-traditional kind of educators, which is pretty unusual in in a public school district in the United States. It tends to be just so up the middle, path of least resistance style education. And there's always good people inside that system, but I was lucky enough to end up in a school that had a kind of disproportionate number of those people. And so I just felt like there was, I was in the choir, and I was in the jazz choir playing bass, and I was in the jazz band, but I just felt like there was just, there was no place for high school bands to play or for people who were writing songs to play. And I just kept being and I had, from the time I was 13 or 14, I'd been going into Seattle and going to open mics, because also this is the dawn of grunge in Seattle, right? Yeah. So you're sort of this is 1988, 89, 90, and you're sort of it's really the heyday of Mudhoney and Nirvana, and there's no all ages music in Seattle. You can't go see a show unless you're 21. And there's this whole thing that's starting to kind of grow up around us. And there was no way for me or anyone I knew to participate in it. So, and coffee shop open mics were sort of the only way that I could figure out how to do that. So when I was 14 and 15, I was going to coffee shops and playing these just absolutely just, caffeinated versions of Space Oddity and Psycho Killer, just because that was how I could do it. And I just sort of felt there's no way I could do this at school. Why? And there's so many creative people doing interesting creative things at school. And can I do that? And I just kept asking questions of particularly my creative writing teacher and the drama instructor at the school. And finally they were yeah, so just once a month, we'll just open up the theater during the lunch period, and you can do that. And they turned into these kind of packed house, 45-minute long, people would get up and just do whatever they were doing. And it was it was a total circus show. It was crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's just a bunch of high school kids kind of showing off and doing whatever they felt pushing boundaries, being obnoxious.
Yeah.
How loud can we make it? How close to obscene can we get? And there was always a teacher there to kind of reel it in. but it was a really beautiful experience. It was really fun.
It's interesting that you were so driven, even at that, and especially as an introvert, that you were driven enough to learn a song well enough that you were prepared to stand in front of a coffee shop with people that you probably didn't know, and go and play something. Can you? We'll get back to the 45-minute circus shows in a sec, but can you put a finger on exactly what it was that you were getting from music, or that you sensed that you could obtain via music, that was driving you to kind of step way outside of what you felt comfortable in order to do that thing, get that hit, whatever, apart from the caffeine, obviously?
Well, it's never apart from the caffeine. It's
in tandem.
In tandem with the caffeine. For me, so much of it came down to just singing and singing the way that I sort of wanted to sing. And there was no, there was no room for me at that, or there was no room anywhere in my sort of like more prescriptive musical experience for me to sing like, like my heroes at that point. Like there was nowhere that I could, there was nowhere that I could like try and sing. Like I've always been really fascinated with, and I've always been really in love with the Bowie song Fantastic Voyage, the first song on Lodger. And particularly like the way that he, we've lost Steve. Is he still there?
He's disappeared. He'll pop back up, I'm sure, hopefully.
Yeah. Like the way that, the thing about Fantastic Voyage is that so many of Bowie's performances are performances where he gave something that he was never able to get back. It's, you're doing it forever. It's for keeps.
Yeah.
There you are, Steve.
I'm back. Sorry. It was a phone call coming in, which might happen again, but hopefully not. Sorry.
Right. So I was talking about Fantastic Voyage, and like the thing about that performance is that it's to me it's like the quintessential Bowie performance of somebody doing something and giving away something that they're never going to get back. Like it's this just like really deeply expressive, truly selfless, just like this is everything I know how to do in this moment kind of performance. And I was just really into that kind of, I was really into that kind of drama at that age. I was really into that kind of expression. I was really into Suede. Okay. Like Brett Anderson was just like, oh my God, here he is. He's doing it. Like that's insane. What are you singing about? Like what's going on? So like that was all of that stuff. Like it also really spoke to me because I have I'm not a big deep tenor. I'm sort of a nasal squeaky kind of singer, but I had a lot of projection and a lot of range, like sort of in there. And that's something that I don't know. So like the coffee shop experience and the like learning songs, it was sort of just an excuse for me to be able to just do that. And for no other reason than because it felt good. It was like fun to do.
So would it be fair to say that you experienced something in the choir work and maybe playing in the jazz choir band, but it wasn't quite scratching the itch that you had, and so it was a natural step to kind of take the stuff into your own hands and then, but because you've done a bit of performance as a group in the choir setting and the jazz choir setting and the other things that you were involved in, it didn't feel like such an enormous leap to then sit in front of some people in a coffee shop because you'd already experienced the nerves and the payoff, the other side of the nerves.
Well, the nerves were terrifying, and they still are. And I get pretty nervous and bent out of shape about a lot of things, and it's like all, it's still all kind of piano teacher insecurity. It's sort of like, it's still in there. It's still just really like really upsetting from time to time. But the coffee shop experiences were like definitely a way to get through that. And I found the choir thing was beautiful because choirs are beautiful and harmony's beautiful, and like singing with people and like feeling a room full of singers who are like pointed in the same direction and who are keening together in real time, like when it's actually in tune and it's actually working. There's just nothing like it. It's amazing. And rooms full of people who are singing together are just, you know, I never went to church. I sort of thought churches were all cults when I was a kid. It's just like, what is going on here? This is so crazy. And but I have a real soft spot for church choirs and for that tradition of like sort of serious group singing, and what that does to an emotional space or to a song. And honestly, like I think that's part of where the group choir thing at the end of Transatlanticism, the So Come On, was having like a small men's choir doing a whole bunch of like a big stacked harmony thing and just like setting it right in the front of the mix, as a big exclamation mark on the end of a piece of music. It was like kind of born from that place.
Right.
But that's the choir thing it's the nerves in that were for me always had to do with feeling like a bit of a hack because I didn't know how to read music, or I only sort of barely knew how to read music, you know?
Yeah.
And my formal training is just about nil, and that has always made me just a little like skittish around people who actually like know what they're doing or whatever.
Yeah. Know that.
So yeah.
And then, if we kind of draw a line under what was happening on the open mics in school, how did you, were you just a solo performer from that point until much later, or did you get into any bands during high school, or I'm guessing you probably formed the bands if there were bands that you were a member of. How did that play out?
So my best friend all through high school, through middle school and high school, I think I met him when I was about 12. It was a guy named Nathan Good, and Nathan was the first drummer in Death Cab.
Right. Yeah.
He plays all the drums on Something About Airplanes, and he plays on 2 of the songs on We Have the Facts. And Nathan is, he's such an exceptional drummer. And to this day, like, it's like you grow up with somebody and they sort of like set somebody you really like respect and admire and love, and who really just like impresses you with what it is that they do. He, like, to this day, he's still just the very definition of drummer to me. Like the way swagger works, the way that he feels. I think the way that he feels 4/4 time is just like so magic. And it's so influenced by Phil Collins, that thing where like the snare drum's always late, but it's always late in exactly the same
the right way
every single time. And so it's hyper consistent, but there's just this like kind of stretch to everything. And Nathan was just really magic at that. So he and I we did a lot of like recording and experimenting and just making noise and, doing stuff together, like playing Rush songs together, like, and then we were in a band together in high school, that I was not the singer, and I was sort of like I sort of played a lot of the same roles I guess I did in Death Cab, where I was sort of like the wingman, sideman, guitar player, bass player, tape machine runner, suggestion maker, keyboard, just like whatever it felt like it needed. And the guy who was the singer in that band was very, he was a big Smiths fan. He was a big Cocteau Twins fan. He was really into all of that stuff that was a step away from really like the kind of really literal record making that I was starting to get into, like by the end of high school, like REM or, you know, all that stuff where you pick up a guitar and it's actually really achievable. He was sort of like into stuff that was like a step away from that, which I found really interesting. And it didn't click right away, but it certainly clicked in the years that followed.
So you were, I mean, all of that role that you describe is basically producer.
Yeah,
because he's the guy who is sort not buried in the kind of band like tussle for I'm going to play my part on this. You're slightly removed and walking around the edge of this scenario, thinking, okay, well, I wonder how we can draw the best out of whatever they're going to thrash out. This is what needs doing, and this is what I'm going to do. So that's obviously just a natural kind of position that you filled because your brain works in that way, which is it's quite fascinating. A natural born producer.
I mean, it sort of all comes back to the balance control with Sgt. Pepper. Sort of like, I feel like listening to this today. Well, this sounds fun. Yeah, I don't know. And
did you do any recordings with that band? What was that? The Wallflowers?
That was the Wallflowers. Yes.
What was the Wallflowers?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you do any recordings with them?
I mean, there's a bunch of 4-track recordings. There was like one real-ish multi-track recording we did. Only one though. Yeah.
And did you produce that?
Produce that? I don't remember, actually. I think I was really nervous.
That doesn't sound like you.
No. Yeah, I actually can't remember if I did or not.
Okay, well, no matter. Let's just say you did. Production credit, Chris Walla. And after high school, did you go to college? I have a feeling that you did. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, I tried to. Me
too.
Yeah, it's good. You know exactly what that was like then. Trying to do good, somebody's good, and then not doing it. Wasting some money, making some bad decisions. I went to, I wanted to go to Bellingham. I wanted to go to Western because that's where all my friends were going. And I ended up not being able to get into Western because my grades weren't good enough. And I was able to get into Central, which is like sort of in the other side of Washington State. It's a 4.5-hour drive from Western.
A long way. Yeah.
And it's a little, Ellensburg's like a little conservative kind of cow town in the middle of the, like a literal cow town. It's like a beef town. And I was, I was like a kind of skinny vegetarian kid who was like really getting into Depeche Mode at that point. And
it fit right in.
Yeah, it was rough, man. It was really rough. And I just didn't last, and I kind of lost it. And moved back in with my parents and started driving up to Bellingham more and more and more often and spending weekends there. And while I was doing that, I enrolled in a community college and did the recording program at the Shoreline Community College north of Seattle. And that was where I learned a bunch of my chops, but not because I was going to class. Because the way that place worked was that there was one studio, but there were 40 people in the program. So the only times I could figure out to get into the studio were the times when the class was in session. So I just, I spent 7 hours a week in the studio, plugging drum machines into rat pedals and making covers of New Order songs, and just sort of like learning about studio workflow and what it all was and how it worked and what worked and what didn't. And then on the weekends, I was driving up to Bellingham and meeting people and watching bands. And it was about that time, this is like 1995 or 6, that I met Ben. And he and I hit it off pretty quickly and started started doing stuff that, that year, maybe the next year, something like that.
Yeah.
And so he was at Western. Is that right?
Yeah. He was working on an environmental chemistry degree, which he ended up securing. He was working at the oil refinery, and then playing in a band in the meantime, and dreaming about being in some other band. So yeah.
So how did you meet him then? What was the connection? Did you just walk up to him at a show, or how did that happen?
No. The connection was that he was dating one of my best friends from high school.
Mm-hmm.
And she sort of felt like, oh, I think you need to meet this guy. Like, he's really kind of right up your alley. And she was right. Yeah. So it was a really sort of the best kind of, the best kind of introduction.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, because it's not a cold, like, hello, I'm Chris, and I think you're really great. The guy runs for the hills.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a recurring nightmare, Steve.
It's one of mine anyway. That's why I was able to articulate it so readily. And so when you met him, did you get guitars out super quickly, or did it take a while, just talking about music and what you both liked and disliked and what you'd been involved in and not? How did that kind of shake down?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get to guitars for quite a while. Like, it was sort of all about records, just like making mixtapes for one another and sharing stuff. And sort of introducing one another to different, just sort of different styles and different ways of, I mean, it's already at that point, it was sort of like different ways of thinking about like recorded music and what it was and how it could work. And at that point, like, like studio time was, it seems so quaint now that it was like sort of so kind of walled off and exclusive and expensive. But there was a real sort of like novelty to recording oneself and putting stuff out that was maybe not like commercial in a traditional sort of way. And the this is kind of the golden age of like, you're kind of, you're still kind of in the golden age of K records as well, like all the all that stuff that Calvin was doing, like the Beat Happening records, and One Foot in the Grave, the back record, came out somewhere in there. And there was a real sort of like 4-track and then kind of 8-track recording boom. And there were a bunch of records that I got really into that were made with equipment that started to feel like more and more and more approachable. Yeah.
Remember when I had one of those Tascam Porters 2s. Remember those? The tiny little thing you could use both. I think it's 2 tracks, but then you could use both sides of the tape. Really, really cool.
Oh, they're great. I mean, I've got my 4 tracks like right here.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I still use it kind of all the time.
I'm going to hang on a second. I'm going to try and find my one now because it's in here somewhere.
Just in there somewhere.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Steve's going all challenge Annika.
The world might fall down if I try and get it out.
Oh God! Did you find it easier to record like on the sort of 4-track type thing? Do you find that's more of your kind of native way of doing it?
I find that it is. I tend to really like natural natural limiters and natural narrowers, like anything that imposes a kind of environmental or
a constraint,
a restriction of some sort. Yeah. Like actually I'm working inside of this set of parameters.
Right.
And I, to this day, I still do a version of that with pretty much every record that I work on. Mm-hmm. Like after spending some time with the artist and figuring out like who they are and what they're doing and what they're not doing, and talking about like hopes and dreams and ambitions versus realities and budget constraints and whatever. Mm-hmm. Like I still think it's really fun to just like choose a rule set for a record. Yeah. And sometimes also a tool set. Like we're just going to limit it to these things. Yeah. And actually this guitar, I think you should play this guitar for this record. And this is the only guitar you're going to play on this record. And here are the reasons I think that's true. Yeah. Or like, actually, we're not, we're going to do the whole record. The bed tracks are all going to be live off the floor. And the rule is that nobody stops a take under any circumstances. And that's just yeah. So like, I really love that stuff. And the 4-track is just sort of a, there it is, the 424 Mark II. That's the best one.
Mark II. Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
It's like
I found it. Yes.
You climbing on things.
I am. Yeah. Look, there's the floor down there.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like my floor. It's really good.
Please don't.
Sorry about that. No, I'm down. It's okay. I've landed. Yeah, constraints are really useful, and I probably need to kind of employ more constraints in my design ethos, because most of the time I really don't. I just kind of do I?
Well, I tend to think of you as somebody who, like, the fact that the fact that you resisted combos for so long, and the fact that you the fact that you sort of the reverb tank is just like a different thing. Yeah, it's not as though you're certainly not like a minimalist in design terms, but you're also like, you're definitely like on a path, and your path is like clear and well defined, and I really enjoy that.
I'm delighted that it appears that way from the outside, because it feels like most of the time it feels like I'm off the path and I'm getting cut on thistles and brambles and things, but it maybe from like a bit distant, it seems like there's a clear defined path. Maybe there is. Maybe it is a straight line. It's just that I'm going through all the brambles to go the direction that I'm going. Perhaps
maybe that is your path. You don't have
that
a
is
path.
My path.
You just have a path of brambles.
I'm treading the bramble path.
Excellent.
Oh dear, yeah. But that's the artist's path, isn't it? It's you're going to do something to be fulfilling in the long term. It's got to be something which has not been done in that way before by anyone else, at least to your knowledge. It may have been done in parallel by someone else in a slightly different way, but it's got to be welling up from in you, and you be producing something that is fully your own rather than just rehashing other stuff. And I suppose that's certainly the main motivating factor in what I'm doing. I want to be doing something new and interesting, and also because I'm making stuff for other people who create things, it's really motivated by enabling someone to feel something when they play one of the pieces of equipment that I've made, and that is probably the main motivational factor in getting me out of bed to do what I do.
Yeah, I feel the same way about music and record making. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
So, where are we? You're Can you remember any of the stuff that you put on those mixtapes to Ben?
Yeah, what was I into at that point? So that's mid 90s. So I was really into, I mean, there's a lot of Britpop and Britpop adjacent music that's in there. I mean, it's sort of like, that was one of the funny things about like Seattle in the 90s, because we couldn't go to any of there was this massive scene happening there, right? And we couldn't experience any of it. It was just like,
must have been really frustrating.
It's really crazy. And so a lot of my feeling was like, yeah, fuck this place. I'll make some other scene my scene. So, so at that point, that was like, we were both really into Super Drag. Did you guys ever get into the Super Drag records? They're really good.
No.
So they were from Knoxville, Tennessee. And my God, that guy can write a melody. And he's got John Davis has just the kind of coolest, nosiest sort of like, just like SC Sound City head or SG Sound City head kind of tone, just this really muscular, thick rock and roll thing. He's so good. So yeah, would have been I think Bedhead was in the mix at that point. And Bedhead are just like, they held up through, I mean, God, the Bedhead influence shows up so much on the Death Cab records. The Ocean Blue, the last of the major label Ocean Blue records is called See the Ocean Blue. That record's really beautiful and really good. That one made it in there. Probably some PJ Harvey. Probably some Beastie Boys.
Okay.
And then like whatever he was making me at that point would have definitely had the Teenage Fan Club on it. Definitely Jawbreaker. What else was in there? Definitely Superchunk. Yeah, that's kind of the landscape. Probably
cool.
Tribe Called Quest.
Oh yes, the Low End Theory.
Yeah. Ben is a big Tribe guy.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite all-time records, the Low End Theory.
Yeah.
It reminds me of being, I guess I would have been, well, I'm 6 months older than you. So that would make me, when did that come out? 91?
Something like that. Yes. Yeah. So you're like 16.
So yeah, 16, 17. Yeah. So yeah, I'd absolutely, and at one point, I think I could sing. I certainly wouldn't call myself a rapper. I knew all the words.
Yeah. Oh, it happens. That's great.
But it's interesting that was a big influence on a band that sounded like Death Cab. And you were saying about how Nathan was like the groove and the swing to that. Loads of the Tribe records had jazz samples on them. And the fact that, I don't know where Nathan was in terms of what he listened to, but that would make him a really good fit if that was one of the places the musical influences were coming from. Because we've said this a few times, well, I've said it, because I don't know, was it a crystallizing moment, or was it just a kind of, I don't think it was even, maybe it was a quiet epiphany. Matt and I went up to, I don't even know what was the festival called. It was a kind of rock heavy Sonosphere, because a friend of mine was the drum tech for Sean Kinney from Alice in Chains. And they were one below headline. Metallica were headlining, and they were on just before them. And I am an Alice in Chains fan. And so we went and saw them, and they were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
There was no production. they were just Alice in Chains, and they have got, like, for a heavy band, they've got such a groove. And then Metallica came on with this ridiculous Madonna style production. And I think we managed to stay for 3 songs before we just said we're going home.
No, we walked out during the 3rd song. I think the intro
during the third song.
Looked at each other, went, go home.
And that, you know, that groove thing, that is, if music is supposed to communicate it, and it feels like, as far as I'm concerned, music has to communicate something. And that maybe because of the music that I was exposed to when I was at a critical age, I don't know, but it's got to have that groove to it. And groove can come in all different shapes and forms, but that human element, which is not quite square. And having said that, I love Kraftwerk. But there's a human element there, and there's a groove there, even in its regimentedness, if that's a word, which it's got to have that to communicate me and to move me. I don't even know where this is, just a weird soliloquy. I'm sorry about that. There should have been a question at the end of this, but I've come to the end of the track. But so you're now kind of writing with Ben, and how quickly after you started playing music together did Death Cab kind of form into what it would become?
It took a while. I mean, we started making things together in, I can't remember if it was the end of 1995 or the beginning of 1996. But I was working on a thing that a tape full of my own songs that Nathan was playing drums on, and there was Ben had suggested that, like, if you ever need somebody to play drums on something, like, you want a different flavor, like, let me know, because Ben's quite a great drummer. And it just sort of sounded like a fun way to like a really kind of like low stakes way to kind of get to know somebody's impulses and instincts musically. So I had been renting like an 8-track. There was an 8-track cassette deck, the same series as your Mark II 424.
Yeah.
Would be the 488, 688. I can't remember.
Is it 828?
Might be. Yeah.
Or 488. No, maybe you're right. Maybe it's 488.
I think it's a 488. And there was one of those that I had been renting from American Music, and you know, they had this little package you could rent, some mics and cables and whatever, and I would, you know, throw that in the back of the car and drive up to Bellingham, and we recorded a couple of my songs together with him playing drums. And that was good. It was just fun. It was light and positive, and we enjoyed it. And I had been getting more and more into, you know, I'd done a few things on my own where, you know, just as an exercise, I would like record something totally myself. And there were a couple of those that I was working on that ended up on that tape. And then Ben had some songs that like weren't fitting into the thing that he was doing, and he wanted to try and record those and see what those were like. And he and Nick were living together at that point, I think.
Okay.
And Nick played on one or two of those, and you know, we did a few different things. Most of them turned up on You Can Play These Songs with Chords, like the Smiths cover with all the wrong words, and the thing called Tomorrow, and there's a song called TV Trays. Like those are all sort of from that era. It's all like cassette 8-track stuff. And then Ben was sort of like, I kind of want to see if I can write bunch of songs and, play everything myself and just like kind of see how that goes. And I volunteered to like, yeah, if you want somebody to record that, like I'd love to do that. It sounds really fun. And that was sort of the beginning of the band.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you were along for engineering duties, did you have any kind of, you know where I'm going with this. Did you have any kind of production ideas, suggestions that you kind of dropped in the mix while you were recording those songs for him?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of all like, it was all just experiments. It was just sort of like, well, let's see if we can do this. I wonder what this sounds like. What if we do this? Let's try that. That sounds kind of bad. What if we did this? Oh, that's cool. Let's do that. Let's do more of that. Why does this kick drum sound terrible? Why can't I play this? Oh, it's too fast. Why, so it's like, it was a, Ben had the, kind of the, there were no demos of those songs. Like he kind of had everything just filed away up here. Like, I think I want it to sound like this. I want it to work like this or something. But I had a lot of, I was like trying things out. I was really into running drums through amps at that point. And I mean, I still am.
Why not? Who isn't?
God, it's great. And, so much of that came from, there was this band from Portland in the 90s called the Spinanes.
Right.
Yeah. And the Spinanes are, for me, I would say if there's any like kind of single template for, like what I wanted to do and like kind of how I wanted it to feel in terms of like presentation and guitar melodies and like that sort of thing. It was probably that second Spinanes record. It's a record called Strand. Okay. And I like, there's just such a one-to-one correlation. Strand like started to turn up pretty early. Like the drummer from the Spinanes went on to play, Scott Plouffe was a drummer in Built to Spill for years, and they were a huge influence, kind of obviously, I guess. But Scotty's drumming is just, it's so cool. It's like just very consistent and like it's not stiff or rigid, but it's very sound somehow. Like the foundation of it is just so like it's in such a box. His parts are like really really chiseled out from section to section, and that was something that he, the Spinanes were just a two-piece, so like marking the verses from the choruses from the bridges was something he had to do a lot of like kind of like his arrangements did a lot of heavy lifting that way for Rebecca in that band. But yeah, like, so that was, anyway, like I was just like lifting ideas from Spinanes records and like sort of feeling like, oh, I wonder how they did this. I wonder if it was like this, let's try this. And, when you don't have that many microphones, that sort of means that like, if you want to run your drums through an amp, you're like using two mics to do something that one mic could do if there was no amp. So there's like fewer mics and less fidelity. And it's just like, recording myself into a corner like over and over again was really fun.
The constraint of not having enough mics to mic it in a traditional way is kind of great, because then you know that it's not going to sound like this thing over here where they use 15 mics on the kit. So I've just got to make something that sounds good. Right. And so how am I going to do that? So actually, rather than saying, well, this has got to be 3 inches from the top head of the snare, and then we have another one, blah, 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 you're just saying, does it sound good here? What about here? What about here? And you're actually using your ears rather than just doing it by numbers.
Yeah. I mean, at that point in time, it's like if somebody pulled out a tape measure, I was like, probably, I'd probably suggest that it was maybe time to get lunch. Let's go make a sandwich. I'm bored.
That's probably a good way to be. Yeah, definitely. And with Death Cab, what you would count You Can Play These Songs with Chords as the first record? I guess that's how many songs were on there?
There were 8 songs on the cassette. Like, I'm still not sure if you count that as a record. Like, I don't know.
What's a record?
It was, I guess, maybe. I mean, it feels to me like Something About Airplanes is the first record. Like, that's the first proper sort of album. It's the first statement. It's the first, You Can Play These Songs with Chords to me is sort of more of a, I mean, not to diminish it. It's really cool. It's really like sort of it's a strange little thing, but it's sort of like it's much more of a question mark than it is a period, I guess. Like
a bit like Westing by Musket and Sextant is for Pavement.
I would say so. That's actually a pretty good analog. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
That's I mean, that was pretty extreme in terms of challenging the listener. And I haven't, to my shame, I haven't listened to You Can Play These Songs. I don't think I've ever, other than today, I managed to, I think I found it on YouTube. I think I did.
Well, the coolest, I would say my favorite thing on You Can Play These Songs with Chords is a song called Hindsight. I just love Hindsight. I think Hindsight is it's actually still one of my favorite of Ben's songs. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful statement. It's really succinct. It's really, and the production of it is like, I mean, it was kind of all accidental, but it sort of frames the song in a really cool way too. It's just something, it was a real early experience for me of like kind of a story and an environment sort of gluing together to make something that was more than the sum of its parts. Yeah, I'm just still so fond of that. It's such a cool like old Polaroid of a recording. Yeah,
and I suppose would it be fair to say that Transatlanticism is an album version of that song in terms of everything just all swinging into place and creating a Polaroid or a snapshot of your experience as a band and individually at that time? Would that be fair? You can please say no. Is a valid answer.
No. I would say no. I would say that the thing about Hindsight is that it is like the thing about Transatlanticism is that it's a very, very much a group experience of a record. And Hindsight is very much to me, it feels like a real snapshot of like the terrarium is just like it's a different size and it's there for a different reason. And it's just all the possibility and potential in the world are in that little recording. But it's still very much like, it's like kind of Ben's thing. And I feel like if there's an album, I feel like We Have the Facts actually is something that's sort of closer to what happens in the spirit of Hindsight, like as a whole record. Because the thing about Hindsight is that there's not much, like, to me anyway, like there's not much like sort of reach to it. It's not like looking out at the sky. It's sort of pretty here. It's a pretty private experience of a song and a record. And I think that for me, like We Have the Facts is like the sort of ultimate expression of that thing, like where it's a really intimate, really detailed, pretty like hermetically sealed kind of container. And I think, like, to this day as an album, I think that We Have the Facts is probably still my favorite. And it's not because it was like the most fun to make, because it really wasn't. It was a drag. But it really was an experience that was like every hair is in place on that record. Like everything was really hard fought for and really chosen, and really just really as detailed as we knew how to make it. And before there was it was made before there was really any inkling that this could actually turn into the thing that we did for a living. And it was the last moment that was like that. There was something in Hindsight that's like really, really innocent, but really muscular about it, all at the same time. It's, I don't know.
It's unself-conscious, I suppose, in a way, because it's not.
It's incredibly self-conscious, though. But it's like it's so aware of itself that it's aware of how aware that you might be that it's so aware of itself. Like, and there's so many meta levels of like looking outside the work and looking inside the work in that record. One more level and it would have fallen over, and one less level and it would never have worked. Like, that's the thing about that record. It's suspended in this just perfect sphere of, 23, 24-year-old security through insecurity. Like, kind of like really acknowledging the impossibility of everything and the impossibility of all of this. And like, just, I don't know. It's such a funny record. It's like it's really tucked into a strange emotional space.
Well, I need to spend some more time listening to it, I think, because I basically jumped on the train at Transatlanticism and kind of rode it for a bit, but I haven't mind the early records. And if you love that one so much, then I owe you many debts of gratitude. And one of the repayments is going to be going and listening to that for the record that it is. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll go and find that.
You're not obligated to listen to it.
Oh no, I will. No, because the thing about music is communication between a group of people and whoever else is out there, you, the one who's listening right now. And when you have an insight into the kind of mental space that someone's in when they're recording / writing, it makes it suddenly, the communication channel opens wider, I feel. And so it's more accessible, and the arrows drive deeper into you when you listen to it, when you have an understanding of where people were physically, emotionally, at the time that they recorded it. So that's it will not be a chore at all, I assure you. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. So this that wasn't a self-release, was it?
No, the everything from that first cassette was a self-release. You can play these songs with chords, and everything from. Well, I shouldn't sell out Elsinore Records. Technically, it was released on Elsinore Records, which is also the same record label that put out. Did they put out they put out one or two of the Microphones records as well, really early on.
Okay.
Because we were all sort of from the same little part of the world. But so Something About Airplanes through Transatlanticism, those 4 records all came out on Barsuk.
Right. Okay. And how did life change then? Because you were talking about earlier the fact that life, you made this record and then suddenly, this is what we're doing for a living now. How did that change with tour and then okay, we're going to have to write something else, and all of that. You know, how did you cope with tour? Was it exciting? Was it crazy?
I found tours to be not. God, they were such a mixed bag, because like the travel part I really enjoyed. Seeing the country I really enjoyed. So much of my sense of like what the United States is and how it works and how politics works in the United States, or doesn't, as the case may be. Like, it's all so informed by driving across that massive continent over and over and over and over and over, and stopping in tons of cities that people, you know, most Americans don't see that many places in the country. And I feel just really grateful that I got to see and meet people like all over the continent, like over and over for years. And in a van, like not sleeping through it all the way that you do on a bus. Yeah. Like actually doing the 10-hour drive, like kind of every day from point A to point B, and then stumbling out of the van all cross-eyed and like playing a rock show and, you know, getting paid in beer tickets. So it was a grind, and the shows were, oh God, there were so many of them that were so bad. And then every now and again, there was one that was just great. Every 9th show or something was like, oh, right, that's why we do this. This was really fun.
And so why was every 9th show great? Because you had just the right balance of being too tired and being fed up and not wanting to repeat the mess that you had done for the last 3 days or something, and just the right amount of caffeine as well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's like there's, you know, it's, I don't know. I think it's sort of in the days before, I mean, you know, let's be honest, it was the late 90s. We didn't know anything about health, or physical or mental. And we certainly didn't know how to like ask one another for something that we might need, like space or, I don't know. It was just sort of like, it was kind of all cigarettes and alcohol and trucker speed and just like, you know, like playing in fire trap basements, and it was just, and sleeping on people's floors, like, you know. And every now it's like, God, there was a string of dates on one of those tours across the Midwest where it was like there were 2 or 3 nights in a row where we ended up in houses that just had like more animals than you're supposed to have in a house. You know? like, oh, you have how many cats? Oh, cool. Great.
They'll sleep in the van.
Yeah. Nick was always the first to be like, I'll take the van. He was very good at that. So it was just a slog. The best parts about tour, I think, were I enjoyed the really long, flat, straight drives where you could really like settle into a thing. I mean, I like all the drives in the States that nobody else likes. Like Denver to Wichita is just like the best.
How long does that take?
Man, that's like 5.5 hours, maybe. Okay. If I remember right. I might not remember right, but that's my guess.
Basically the length of England.
yeah, exactly. God, I mean, I when we did that Franz Ferdinand tour in 2006 that the Cribs were on, we were in buses, so it was a bus tour. You know, it was routed like a bus tour where you can do these like big long drives, and they were in a van. And like every day they were sort of like, oh my God, this is like the entire country. We just drove all of England like again twice today, you know, just over and over and over.
And the Jarman brothers, they are so resilient. It's unbelievable. And actually interesting little tie up there on when you were doing Transatlanticism, I think I was playing drums in a band on a record label called Wichita.
I didn't know this. Which band was that?
It was a band called Weevil.
Okay.
They were kind of on record, there was a bit of acoustic drums, but quite heavily programmed synths and twin, I want to say falsetto vocals, probably. And then bits of guitar and electric guitar and stuff. And we toured for the little bit of touring that we did as 5-piece, I think. And we were supposed to, I think we got the call from somebody or other that you needed a support and there was a chance that we were going to support you. But then I wasn't around. I'd booked to go on a skiing trip with my wife. And I was like, well, find a drummer and do it if you want, but I'm not going to throw away the money that I paid on this holiday, I'm afraid. So that's how rock and roll I was. But yeah, anyway, the Germans were, the Cribs were on the same record label. And they were just, they didn't do us any favors because they were like 16, 17, 18 at that point, and give them a crate of beer and a van and they would be anywhere in the UK or Europe and not ask for any money or anything, just be everywhere. Whereas we were a bit older, I guess I was like 27, 28, and £40 for a gig per day was not really very appealing. So yeah, hats off to the Germans. Like, and they're still going. They got a new record out.
Yeah, and the two songs I've heard from the new record are great.
Yeah, really great. They're consistently good. And I mean, a band that has Johnny Marr in it, for even if it was for one record, that's, you know, enough kudos.
Indeed. Yeah.
Great. Really good. So when did you transition from trudging around in a van, driving yourselves, to a bus?
It was toward the end of, no, I guess it was, we did one transatlanticism tour. Let me think. Jason only did one tour with us in a van. And that would have been the tour that we booked around the trip from Seattle to San Francisco, like down the West Coast and back, where we recorded a bunch of transatlanticism in San Francisco. So I guess it was the first tour that we did after transatlanticism came out. We were in a bus.
And did that change? Did that change the dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Massively, because you could sleep and still be moving.
Well, yeah, we could sleep and we could drink a lot more.
Was that good or bad?
Yeah. It got pretty gnarly there for a couple of years. Yeah, there's a lot of drinking.
Was there anything that precipitated pulling back from that?
I think that what was, God, I don't know. I think it was just like, you know, you can only wake up so many times and go, oh God, what, why, no.
Yeah.
And just like, and for a while it like doesn't affect things because like you're in your mid-20s and you're kind of chemically resilient and it's fine. But then it really starts to like kind of affect things, and it affects, you know, it affects performances, and it affects your relationships with your friends, and it affects your, you know, it's like, I don't know. I was starting to make most of my bad decisions involved calling people that I shouldn't have been calling, like, or sending emails like to the heads of record labels when I was pretty drunk, like just doing things that were started, and waking up the next morning and my box is full, you know, my inbox is full of emails from people who are like, you just copied me on an email where you yelled at the head of my record label, and what are you doing? Like, why did you do that? You know, like you do a couple of those and it's sort of like, oh God, wow, trouble. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe I should reevaluate some things.
Yeah.
And so I quit drinking, I don't know, it was like sort of after plans. I think it was a couple years later. It was like 2006 or 7, and Ben followed suit pretty shortly thereafter.
Well, completely kind of teetotal. Nothing.
Yeah, just like, yeah. And I sort of, it started as like, I'm going to cut back, and then it sort of turned into like, oh, I don't know if I know how to do that. I don't think I do know how to do that. I think I'll just stop.
Was that hard?
It was not nearly as hard as quitting smoking. I would say that quitting smoking is, I still struggle with that. It's still hard. But I think the hardest thing about drinking is how it rewires your sense of inhibition. And for me, I think going back to the piano teacher and sort of that insecurity, like a lot of that was kind of set aside and diminished and waylaid through like 1 or 2 or 3 drinks. And so it wasn't hard to make the decision to stop, but the fallout of it was actually having to deal with, just all that stuff from earlier in life, like all that kind of like latent relational baggage and stuff that's sort of, out on the edges of, somewhere out in the reaches of like the abuse spectrum. So,
and do you think the experience of being on tour and the alcohol hastened the awareness that you needed to deal with some of that stuff, or at least confront it, if not, and start to try and process it? Or do you think the alcohol was a way of just kind of getting rid of those, as you were saying, getting rid of that inhibition that you naturally just kind of inhabited?
Yeah, I don't think I had much of an awareness that there was much to work through, actually, until I think well after I had quit drinking. And actually, I think it took a couple of years for me to sort of feel like, oh, wow, like I'm just sort of hitting a lot of the same walls kind of over and over again. And the thing about being in a rock band that achieves the kind of like velocity and scale and size and heft that Death Cab for Cutie had achieved by that point and has sustained to some degree, like to this day, is that they're, and I want to preface this by saying that the group of people that we had around us, our label and management, wonderful. They're great. They're really lovely people who were looking out for our best interests. And, just we got really lucky in that sense. But even so, the incentive to keep the wheels on the bus, to keep everything rolling, to keep everything moving, to keep, there's just like, it's inevitable. Like the machine is, it's well-oiled and it works and it's profitable, and there might be room to acknowledge, and, while there was room to acknowledge and like kind of work with and talk through mental health or addiction issues, there wasn't really the framework to kind of like actually get through that stuff. When you have a group of people, I won't even talk about the group of people. Like for me, it was, I think I was kind of in a sense of, it was a bit of suspended, it's sort of a suspended reality where you're like, you just cease kind of being, your path to responsibility and navigating society sort of like ends at a certain point. when you join a band with a management, or when you become a band that has like a management structure like that, and you sort of lose touch with like, I lost some touch with like how people actually work and what their, you know, concerns are from day to day, and like kind of how they navigate the world and the sort of things that they might need or that actually I might need. And I, you know, it's kind of, I mean, the word for it is mind fuck. Like there's sort of just not it's just really, it's really confusing. It's really strange. It's an alternate reality.
And it's like you say, and we've heard it plenty of times, it's almost like it serves looking at it through a purely cynical lens, it serves the machine to infantilize the band.
Yeah.
Because then they can kind of get you to do what they want without too much, you know, they can make sure that there's alcohol there so that you might make a bit of a mess, but basically it's contained, and it means that you go to bed or on the bus or whatever, and you get to the next stop, and you just, like you say, you just keep the wheels on the bus, keep the wheels turning. And they have a word with you if the performance suffers, I guess. I mean, we spoke to Charlotte Hatherley, who was playing in Ash, and she was so chronically stage frightened. Is that before going on? She got to the point where she was drinking a bottle of vodka just to get on the stage, and that was okay up to a point until someone in management soloed her guitar part and her vocal and said, right, you need to listen to that. That's what's happening because you're drinking that much. And then obviously she pulled back. But if it's not affecting it to that degree and everyone's having a great time and everyone's getting paid, then it's kind of in their interest to let drinking dogs drink. So, which is really, it's sad, but I suppose if you're not employed to be their parent to some degree, unless that's your character as a manager, you just got to get this. You're fighting battles on so many different levels that you just want your charge to perform the thing that they need to perform when they need to perform it, and then rinse and repeat. And so allowing them to, blow off steam as they might see it, by getting completely out of their tree on whatever substance or alcohol is like, okay, well then, as long as the wheels keep turning, I'll let it slide. So yeah, it's a shame, and it would be nice if there were more kind of, I don't know, is ethically sensitive management. I don't know whether that is that an impossibility? Is there no kind of?
I actually don't think that it is, and there does seem to be a real. I think that one of the really interesting sort of side effects of the everything all the time kind of news cycle and social media bubble that everybody lives in is that more people are more aware than they have ever been that shit is hard, and it's hard for everybody. And I hear more artists having more meaningful conversations inside of their creative work, like inside of their band or their bubble or like whatever it is that they're doing, than I ever heard in the first handful of years that we were a band. Like, it just seems that there's a lot more acknowledgement and a lot more understanding that this is just that actually this is a pretty crazy thing to do for a living, being in a band, being a songwriter, making records, about how it's all just like you're literally starting with nothing. There is no song. There's no.
Wow, that's loud.
There's no. performance,
we've got
nothing there.
Oh,
what's happening?
He's gone somewhere. Yeah, I've got a good friend of mine who he writes a lot of pop stuff, you know, and he says that it took him a long time to get used to the fact that like 90% of what he does is not going to get anywhere. It's literally it's all a punt. It's just constantly trying, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that when I was in originals bands, and I found that really tricky, you know, to kind of get your head around that, because you know I'm fine with, like, you know, you make something, you have it, and then you can sort of sell it or do something with it, and then you've got nothing that then goes out into the ether, and you're just waiting. You're kind of just hoping people like it, you know.
Yeah.
It's
hoping people can find it for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, and finding the like-minded people that will like the stuff that you're making, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the chain of people that have to like that to then for that to see the light of day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really, really, it's kind of bonkers to think about it.
I find the abstraction of being a songwriter, producer, musician, artist at this point in time is perhaps the hardest. It's the hardest part of it. Like, it's always been like kind of abstract to a degree. But the path from creation, like the moment of creation and inspiration, through to a thing that feels like the thing you want to present to the world, like the not having a clear or prescribed kind of like product chain or supply chain or whatever is like, if when the thing you do with this piece of music that you've made is to put it on Spotify and that's like kind of it. That's a really, it's such an abstract, such a bizarre kind of reward for what you've done. It's really like, so many times the whatever profit you might see from it is just so infinitesimal that you're like literally doing it for clicks. And the chance of like making any kind of meaningful you know, even tip money from it is just such a, you know, it's so unlikely, even remote. And I find that really dispiriting and discouraging. I just think that's a really difficult it's a difficult way for me to think about making music. I've always been really tactile and really physical. But I feel like everything I do is sort of geared toward like honing in on like a thing and having a thing at the end of it that I can say like, I made this and this is how much money I'm asking for it. And, you know, if you think this is worth it, or if you want to take a chance on it, like, please do. That's great. And I would be really grateful. And I, you know, obviously like that, the people who operate with that, the musicians who operate with that kind of like spirit and ethos are finding that Bandcamp is working pretty well for them. But there's still like the, you know, there's still kind of the abstraction part. There's like, I just need a thing. And and that's really, you know, that's really tough for me. So yeah, I don't know.
And when it isn't a physical thing, I think it's very easy for people to assume that it ought to be free. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of the amount of time and effort and probably money that goes into creating a thing like this. The podcast is a thing, and people don't think about the fact that it's costing money and time and effort to make it happen on lots of levels. Obviously, once you've got it running, there's some degree of money that you've got to use to keep it going with hosting and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah, sure.
how much more a record? I mean, a record, the amount of resources that get poured into making a record is phenomenal. And yet there's a disconnect between that process and the MP3 or the stream that you get, because you don't even get an MP3 now. It's just a stream, but that's nothing. What is a stream? And so therefore, why would I pay for it?
Yeah.
I'm definitely about things. I'd love to have. I've started getting more vinyl now because it just feels like, I don't know, you connect to it in a different way. You feel differently about the music when you have a physical object, and obviously there's all of the the artwork and those kind of things. But a thing is a thing.
Yeah, the artwork's
like
a massive
things.
I remember when I was a kid, just looking through all my dad's record collection and studying the artwork, like literally like this. And then early, I remember when I started getting CDs then, but like Dookie, the Green Day album, I knew every little character and what they were doing and all the funny little things that were hidden through it and all that stuff. And you don't get that.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't get that.
Yeah. Each one of them is just a world that you get to stare into and have an experience with. And I think that stuff still happens. It just doesn't happen in music in the same way. It's like, that's why, that's why gaming is
massive.
It's the biggest, there's more profit in gaming than there is any other form of entertainment. And it's because the environments are so rich and so captivating and the worlds are so, so big and so thick. And I really respect that. And I respect all the work that goes into that. And I also understand that it's just not for me. Like, it's not mine. It's not my thing. And it's really clear to me that there's still, it's really easy to sort of think that like, oh, everybody's gaming. That's all anybody's doing. Everybody's gaming. Like, oh, it's all anime, or, oh, it's all TikTok. Everything's on TikTok. Everything's on Spotify. And part of what keeps me continuing to get up in the morning is the fact that I keep running into artists, young musicians, young producers who don't feel that way and who don't operate that way. And there's just like such a huge collection of people in the world who are who really understand the kind of joy and the kind of the kind of like just tactile satisfaction that comes from working with something that you have a one-to-one relationship with, like a drumstick and a drum, or like a guitar and a set of strings, or whatever it is. And I don't say any of this to disparage pop music, because I've been, trying to make a lot of it myself, and it's like the craft of it is just amazing. It's really interesting. And a lot of it's like really, really good, but there's still people who are just craving the physics. And if there weren't, there wouldn't still be rock bands that have, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids in them. But they keep happening. The world keeps making rock bands and they keep loving it. They keep loving doing it. And some of them continue to actually get really good. And that just like gets me up in the morning. I love it. I really love it. That's just, it's, yeah. I just feel so grateful actually that there's still that tradition. I mean, like 100 years from now, people will talk about rock and roll bands as a folk tradition, like the way that we talk about any particular kind of like a folk dance, or like the mating ritual of an extinct animal or something. It'll be something that was like, it'll be a curio. It'll be something that required a lot of difficulty that People don't seem to like want or need in the same way anymore. And I'm just still so happy that we're in a time where it's still like the light's still on and it's still happening and it still feels really alive.
I'd never really thought about that, but I guess things do, you know, like traditional English folk music and themes and things immortalized by composers like Vaughan Williams, who went around the country and tried to document as much as he possibly could before they died out. There's no reason, or although rock bands like to believe that they're immortal, and they feel like they're immortal for some of the time.
Yeah.
Potentially, when none of us are, and it's all going to come to an end, and that's probably something. I wonder whether we would live our lives differently if we kind of thought about that and thought about how that impacts decisions that we make. Do we live functionally as if we're immortal, or do we live functionally as if we're mortal? And is one better than the other? And I'm not trying to preach at all, but it's just like that's a conversation that we all need to have with ourselves, I think. And we have so much distraction and noise in our lives a lot of the time that we don't even, like you were saying, you didn't know that you had all this emotional stuff to rake through. There's so much noise in our lives, we don't even begin the inkling of a thought that there might be a conversation that we need to have about that stuff.
Your question about do we live as though we're mortal or as if we're immortal, and the internal conversation of that, it feels so much to me like the like recorded music or live music. Choose one. And like you can't and you shouldn't. Like we are both mortal and immortal. It's like this is our only time around, and it's really limited, and it's also I mean, every moment is like infinite, and it's I don't know. It's and that's, to me, like it's just one of the like the insane paradoxes of recorded music and why I like recording so much. Like they really are like they are both, they're both immortal and also were never living in the first place. And they suggest a thing that you may be able to have a closer experience with if you can find the artist, if the artist is still alive and still performing, but that's never a given. And they suggest so much possibility, but they also suggest that possibility, that doors close and things get finished, and that things are set in stone or in wax, and that they're, once they're done, they're done. And I just love all of that paradox, that all happens inside of a song, inside of a record. I think that's so great.
But the thing about the song is, and the thing about the record is, that it makes you even start thinking about the fact that there is a paradox of that, of that. And I think lots of us wander around and don't start thinking about that fact. And I think that it's definitely, you're missing out on a lot of richness in life if you don't even scratch the surface of that, having that conversation with yourself. And I'm not suggesting that you have to choose one camp or the other. And it's my inability to articulate a thought which has dogged me from the day I was able to speak, which probably and will ever do ever more. But I fundamentally I agree with you. There is a paradox there, but we need to investigate that. And I think that's what art does, or that's what art should do. Investigate those kinds of questions and accept that things are finite as well. As human beings, we're finite. We're not going to be on this planet forever as individuals. So you might as well wring as much as you possibly can out of every moment that you're here. And instead of sitting in front of your phone or your computer scrolling through your Instagram feed, looking for something that will make you stop scrolling, maybe go and do something.
Yeah. I mean, you've just described the last 2 weeks of my life. Elections have a tendency to do that.
Yeah. It's easily done.
Yeah.
But it's designed to do that, isn't it? It's designed to draw us in. And I have a conversation with my 14-year-old who I was hoping was going to come home so I could go back into the workshop, because I have two little people in the living room now, while my other little person is picked up by the second little person's mum from school. So I have a conversation with my 14-year-old about how social media is designed to captivate you, and it's like this. Well, it is a drug, isn't it? Because you become addicted to it, and you know that you want to get off it. You know that you want to do something else. But is there someone at the door? No. Oh, that's all right. That's fine. Dulcie's playing on the piano. She's winning then. 5-year-old gravitated towards the piano. Yes. We're winning on some small level. So just the fact that she's on her phone and we're having a conversation about how addictive this thing is, and she still can't drag herself away from it. That's that's the battle that we're fighting. And it's tough.
I mean, even drugs, even the most addictive ones, don't literally talk to you about how you must keep using them.
That's true.
What the phone companies and the Instagram and Twitter are sort of, I mean, they kind of literally do that. Like you suggest to somebody, it's like, maybe you shouldn't have an iPhone. Maybe you shouldn't have, I didn't until like much longer than a lot of people. I lasted until about 2016 without a smartphone. And
when I met you in 2011, you didn't have it.
No.
And you were holding off.
Yeah, I was holding off, and I held off for as long as I could. And that phone, I mean, I would say the only reason that I don't have it anymore is because they phased out, they were just phasing out 2G networks like all over the world, and it just like ceased to work in a lot of different places. And I, so here I am in the modern world.
Forced into using the drug.
Exactly. Yeah.
It always amazed me about the older phones. This is, is that the batteries last forever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
But anyway, that's a very dull. Battery life is a very dull subject.
Captivating, I would say.
Yeah, but
we're exactly. Yeah, go on, do your thing.
Yeah, so we're coming up to the end of this thing, and thank you so much for coming on. It's been amazing. Just sort of I've hardly said anything. I've just been sat here listening. But yeah, there's one thing that we ask people at the end of these things, and it's, what would you, if you could go back in time, what would you say to your younger self? And also, what do you think your younger self would say to you now?
If I was to go back in time and say something to my younger self, it would be, what would it be? I mean, it would be some version of, hopefully I would catch myself in a weaker moment and I would be able to say, don't stop, keep going. Keep going, keep following, like whatever the weird, doesn't seem, whatever the weirdest thing is that feels good that you keep getting like kind of yelled at for or shamed for or whatever, like keep doing that. I think that's really important. And if I was my younger self and I was going to come to the present and say something to me now, I think it would probably B, to look at some of what I was doing, and I would probably say, whoa, that's cool. And I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I don't always think it's cool. I just think it's like kind of a burden sometimes. Yes, and it's actually not that cool, but it's actually like really fucking cool, and I just forget.
Yeah.
Well, when you're on the bramble path, it doesn't feel cool.
No, it doesn't. It just feels like a bunch of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
That's a good one to remember.
Yeah.
In the bramble path.
It's all cool.
Wicked. Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah.
This is lovely.
Really fun.
Yeah. We should do number 2, because I think not do a number 2. We should do we should do part 2, because there's so much more stuff that I had to ask, and maybe Matt and I could do some music revision in the interim.
I've got like loads of notes. I've got tons of post-its of bands to check out now.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so thanks so much. My weekend playlist is sorted.
Oh, that's great. Oh, excellent. Well,
it's so good to see you.
See you. Yeah, I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you too.
We'll hang out
one
again.
day. We will. Yeah, we will. Yeah. If not physically, then at least on Zoom.
Yeah, anytime.
It's the modern way.
The modern way. That's how we do it. All right.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Chris.
See ya. Bye.